Chapter 12, in which Cimorene calls on a dragon and the Stone Prince discovers a plot. The shortcut to Roxham's worked just as well as Cimorene had hoped, and she even made up for some of the time she had lost earlier. Roxham was in too. She could hear the scraping of his scales as he moved around inside. She stepped up to the entrance of the cave and called, "Dragon Roxham?" Something round and shiny flew through the air, missing her by inches. It hit the wall of the tunnel with a loud clang and slid rattling to the floor. She jumped. "Roxham!" she shouted at the top of her lungs. "What's this?" he said, poking his nose out of the cave entrance. "I am Cimorene, Princess to the Dragon Consul, and I offer you greetings and good fortune in all your endeavors." She thought it best to be particularly polite in case Roxham was in a bad mood. She suspected he might be. In her experience, someone in a good mood did not throw things at visitors. "Very good," he said. "Nice to see you again and all that, but I haven't got time for visitors at the moment. Sorry." "I'm not a visitor, exactly. Kazul sent me with a message for you." "Oh, well, that's different. Just hand me that shield there, would you?" She picked up the shield from the floor of the tunnel. There was a large dent in one side where it had hit the tunnel wall, and several smaller ones over the rest of it, from banging against things on its way to the tunnel floor. "You ought to be more careful," she said severely. "Just look at this." "Ha!" he snorted, examining the dents. "Shoddy work, shoddy work. That's the problem. In my day, you could roll a knight in full armor down the far side of the Vanishing Mountain and bounce him off 2 or 3 cliffs without so much as scratching his surface, much less denting it. This cheap modern stuff just doesn't hold up. If you knew it wasn't going to hold up, you shouldn't throw it around like that. You almost hit me." He shifted uncomfortably. "Sorry, didn't mean anything by that." "All right, but next time look before you throw things," she told him, handing him the shield. "I always have this problem when I try to find something," he confided. "Never know where to look. Gets frustrating. And next thing you know, I'm pitching armor at the walls. Bad habit, but hard to break." "Maybe I could help," she suggested. "After I give you Kazul's message, that is." "Don't need help to put dents in things," he told her. "Comes to that, I don't really want it." "I don't mean help throwing things," she told him politely. "I meant help find whatever you're looking for." "Oh, that. Well, come in, then." She followed the dragon into a moderately large cave, similar to the one Kazul used as a living area. Roxham's cave, however, was full of clutter. She had to pick her way past bits of armor, one half of a pair of bookends, a box of tea, a pink scroll, 3 mismatched kitchen pots, and a small wooden statue, a broken flute, and 4 partially burned candles. Roxham walked straight over the mess as if it weren't there, squashing a mangy-looking stuffed pigeon and flattening a tin cup in passing. He dropped the shield on a pile of silk flowers and waved Cimorene to a seat on a large wooden chest near one wall. "Now what's this message of Kazul's?" "It's about the wizards," she said, settling gingerly onto a dusty surface of the chest. She made a mental note to find Roxham a nice princess as soon as she possibly could. "Eleanor and I found one of them picking Dragonsbane a few days ago, and Kazul thinks King Tokuz will listen to you if you tell him about it." "So that's where they got it," he said in tones of disgust. "Pity you couldn't have mentioned it sooner." She got a sinking feeling. "What do you mean?" "Somebody poisoned King Tokuz this morning," he explained. "Slipped some Dragonsbane in his coffee. Fast acting, nothing to be done. Now, we need a new king." "That's awful! Do you know who did it?" "Those dratted wizards, that's who," he said angrily. "It's obvious. Stupid thing to do. Has to be wizards, by George. But Warrug won't listen to me." "Warrug? What's Warrug got to do with it?" "He's in charge of the investigation," he replied. "Taking his time about it, too, if you ask me." "But if the king was only poisoned this morning—" "What does that have to do with it?" he said unreasonably. "Besides, if Warrug doesn't hurry, he won't have the culprit in hand by the time the trials start tomorrow." "Trials? You mean with coal and stone? To choose the new king?" she said with some hesitation. She did not see how it could be a trial for the person who had killed the king if they hadn't caught him yet, but he was not completely certain if the dragon didn't have some way of getting around that problem and trying him anyway. "That's it," he said, pleased. "And before I leave, I have to find that emerald I picked up 50 years ago. Coronation present for the new king." "But you haven't got a new king yet," she said, feeling somewhat bewildered. "And what if you're the king?" He smiled broadly. "Knew you were a nice gal. Me, the king? I rather like the idea. I still have to find the emerald, though. Wouldn't do to show up at the trials without a coronation present. Wrong thing to do. Overconfident. Though she wasn't upset and more than a little worried, Cimorene helped Roxham as best she could. After about an hour of poking through the clutter, she found the emerald, wrapped in a gold-embroidered handkerchief and stuffed into a mouth of a large brass horn. He thanked her and invited her to stay for tea, but she politely declined. She was eager to get back to Kazul and tell her what had happened, and decided what to do next. She hurried back to Kazul's cave by the shortest route, thinking so hard about Toko's death that she forgot everything else. She found Kazul sleeping and was forced to wake her, despite her worries about the dragon's health. She knew Kazul would want to hear about the king of the dragons as soon as possible, and she wanted to hear what Kazul made of Warrug's involvement in the investigation. "Back already?" the dragon asked her, opening her eyes. "Didn't Roxham get you to see King Tokaz?" "No," she said. She hesitated, uncertain as the best way to break the news. "It was too late." "Too late?" Kazul raised her head, startled. She eyed Cimorene briefly, then said, "All right, let's have it. What happened?" "King Tokaz was poisoned this morning. Roxham said someone put dragon's bane in his coffee." She snorted. Somebody knew Tokaz pretty well. Seeing her surprised expression, she explained, "Tokaz drank Turkish coffee every morning. That stuff is strong enough to take the roof off your mouth. That's why no one ever went to talk to him over breakfast. You could boil a whole field's worth of dragon's bane in a Turkish coffee without changing the taste enough to notice. Or the texture." She tried to imagine coffee, even Turkish coffee, strong enough to take the roof off of a dragon's mouth, and failed. "I told Roxham about the wizard Eleanor I met, and Roxham said I have to tell Warrug because Warrug is in charge of finding the poisoner. But when you caught Antorel picking dragon's blade, he thought Warrug had sent you," she said. "If Warrug's mixed up with the wizards—" She broke off, coughing. She watched her anxiously, but the coughing spasm did not last long. "I don't like this," she finished when she got her breath back. "I don't either," she agreed. "But what can we do about it?" Kazul frowned and said nothing. For several minutes the two sat and thought in silence. Then Kazul said, "We can't do anything until the new king has been chosen. Did Roxham say when the testing will be?" "Tomorrow," she told her. "Tomorrow?" She surged to her feet. "Why didn't you say so at once? If I'm to be at the Fort of Whispering Snakes tomorrow, I have to—" "Lie down," she commanded. Cimorene looked at her in surprise and collapsed in another fit of coughing. Cimorene waited until the dragon's coughing had subsided, then said sternly, "You're in no condition to go hauling rocks all over the countryside. I'd be surprised if you can even fly as far as the end of the pass. I think you're going to have to give up on these trials this time around." The dragon made a choking noise. Cimorene looked at her in alarm, then realized that the dragon was laughing. "It's not optional, princess," she told her. "All the adult dragons in the mountains of Mourning are required to show up, no matter what condition they're in." "But—" "There is no acceptable excuse for missing the testing of a new king," Kazul repeated. "None. And I have a great deal to do before I leave, so if anything needs to be done around here, I'll do it," she said firmly. "If you don't rest, you won't be able to fly at all, and then how will you get to the ford?" Reasonable point. She reluctantly settled back into place. "Very well. The first thing I need is a coronation present for the new king. There's a jeweled helmet on a shelf in the second storeroom that might do. Bring it out so I can take a look at it." The princess spent the rest of the evening running errands for Kazul. Besides choosing a coronation gift, Kazul rejected the helmet and 2 crowns before deciding on a scepter made of gold and crystal. Innumerable messages had to be delivered to various dragons who were in charge of arranging the trials. This one had to be informed of Kazul's ill health so that it would be taken into account when the order of testing was established. That one had to be told that Kazul would not be able to join the coronation procession. Substitutes had to be found to perform Kazul's various ceremonial duties. Then their names had to be approved by a surly dragon in charge of protocol. And finally, the substitutions had to be recorded in all the lists of all the dragons managing each of the events. It reminded Cimorene strongly of Linderwall and her parents' court. By the time the last arrangement had been made and the last message delivered, it was very late and Cimorene was exhausted. She was also very glad she had not let Kazul do all the running around. The dragon, who had slept most of the time Cimorene was out, was looking much better, even in the dim light of Cimorene's lamp. Tired, but satisfied, she went to her room and dropped into bed. She was up early the next morning, stirring a dozen ostrich eggs in a large iron kettle for Kazul's breakfast. Kazul ate all of them, then slid out of the cave and prepared to leave for the ford of Whispering Snakes. Don't fret, Princess. The testing doesn't start until 10. I have plenty of time to get there, even if I stop to rest now and then. Her voice sounded much better than it had the day before, and it no longer seemed to rasp her throat. While I'm gone, why don't you visit Warrug's princess? See if she's noticed anything odd these past few days. We need to know as much as we can before we talk to the new king about Warrug and the wizards. All right, as soon as I'm done with the dishes. She turned and leapt into the air, her wings churning clouds of dust from the dry surface of the ground. The princess squinted after her and shouted, "Good luck!" Kazul's wings dipped in answer before the dragon soared out of sight behind the shoulder of the next mountain. The princess stood looking after Kazul, her forehead wrinkling in worry. After a moment she shook herself and went inside. She had work to do. Washing the dishes did not take long, and as soon as she was done, she set off to visit Alanora. The tunnels and passageways were silent and empty, and her footsteps echoed eerily through the darkness. She began to wish she had taken the longer route along the outside of the mountain. She had not realized that the dragon city would seem so strange and lifeless with all the dragons gone. Psst! Cimorene! Cimorene jumped, and she rolled in the direction of the voice, raising her lamp like a club, and Alanora stepped out of the adjoining tunnel into the circle of light. In one hand she clutched a large bucket 3/4 full of soapy water, and she looked rather pale. "Alanora," she said, lowering her arm, "what are you doing out here?" "Shh," Alanora said. She looked nervously over her shoulder. "Warrug told me to scrub off the table in the banquet room while everyone was away, and I heard someone moving around in there, even though everyone but us is gone, and I dropped my lamp, and... oh my goodness! The Stone Prince! I've forgotten all about him!" "Who?" "The Stone Prince!" Quickly, the princess explained how she had found and hidden him the day before. "And I hadn't thought about it until now, but this is the perfect time to get him out of the mountains." Quickly, Cimorene explained how she had found and hidden him the day before. "And I hadn't thought about it until now, but this is the perfect time to get him out of the mountains," she finished. "All the dragons are gone, and no one will see him. Come on, before I forget again." Alanora nodded dubiously, and the two girls headed for the banquet room. When they arrived, Cimorene went in first, holding her lamp high. "Prince?" she called. "Are you there?" "It's me, Cimorene." "Yes, I'm here," said the prince, unfolding stiffly from a gray lump in the corner. "I'm glad you're back. Who is this you brought with you?" "This is Princess Alanora," Cimorene said. "She's the princess of the dragon Warrug just now." "Does her father need a great service done for him?" he said, asking hopefully. "Not that I know of, unless you're good at getting rid of aunts, but that would be more of a service to Alanora than her father." "I could think of nothing that would make me happier," the prince said, with evident admiration, as he bowed stiffly to Alanora. "Good afternoon, princess. Or should it be good evening? It's hard to tell without windows." Alanora blushed and looked down at her bucket without answering. "Actually, it's good morning," she told the prince. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come back for you, but, well, a lot's been going on." Alanora looked up sharply. "You've been sitting here in the dark all night? You could have at least left him with a candle, Cimorene." "Thank you for the thought, Princess Alanora. But it's just as well she didn't," the Stone Prince said. "If I'd been sitting here with a lit candle, they'd have noticed me right away, and an unlit candle isn't much use in the dark, is it?" "What do you mean?" Cimorene said. "Who would have noticed you?" "The dragon and the two men he was talking to," replied the prince. "I think they were wizards." "What?" said Cimorene and Alanora together. "Well, they talked as if they were wizards," the prince said. "They weren't carrying staffs, though." "What did they look like?" "They were both tall, and they both had beards. The older one's was gray, and the younger one's was brown." "And Toril and Zeminar," she said. "And they were talking to a dragon?" The Stone Prince nodded. "Then they wouldn't have been carrying staffs. Dragons are allergic to them. Did you hear what they said?" "Something about a contest," the Stone Prince said. "The wizards are going to fix it so this dragon would win. It sounded like it was a kind of cross-country race, and the wizards were going to hide along the path and help the dragon out somehow. I'm afraid I'm not very clear about that part. Spells aren't my specialty. I'm much better at hopeless causes. Eleonora and Cimorene exchanged appalled glances. The trials with Colin Stone to pick the new king, Eleonora said. Which dragon? Cimorene asked urgently. Do you know which dragon they were talking to? I only heard the name once, the prince said. He sounded apologetic and a little embarrassed. And I don't think I got it right. It's too silly. Tell us, she demanded. Well, it sounded like warthog, the prince said in an even more apologetic tone than before. Could it have been warrog? She asked. That's it. I knew it couldn't really have been warthog. What a pity you remembered, said a voice from the entrance into the banquet hall. Cimorene whirled, and Troll stood in the doorway, staff in hand, watching them with an intolerable, smug expression. Chapter 13, in which Eleanor discovers an unexpected use for soap and water, and Cimorene has difficulty with the dragon.